Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Barbarian, and before you can see the greatest achievement that this run has seen, I think, and the greatest change to the entire world as well. You can of course see the Eromata Imperio Santua, so the Holy Roman Empire, also known as the Western Roman Empire. And I am incredibly excited for this new chapter of the world because it really does change every single dynamic related to Western Christianity, related to Catholicism, but also of course related to our family, House Boscarantia, as well as the Devasconia dynasty, as well as our original house, the Comminges, and I think we are at a very, very interesting point. Now, this chapter might be a new one, but the story of Emperor Philippe the Great is still running. He's merely 54 years old, so no matter what comes afterwards, we are of course going to experience what he experiences firsthand and first and foremost. So that being said, in this video, I would like to go over where we are. This is both when it comes to the symbolism of the empire, what it means for the world, what it means to Emperor Philippe, what it means for the Pope, and what it means for the rest of Western Christianity, but also what is coming towards us here when it comes to the electors, towards the makeup of the empire, and what that might mean for future emperors, including, of course, the question of succession. A question that is very, very difficult to answer, but a question that we need to find an answer for. We're going to talk about that. We're going to basically take some steps into the future. This includes both a court event as well as casting our vote for a successor, but it also includes taking a really good look at everything going on in the Slavic world, because, well, a lot has changed. These religious drops that I have created, they, have been very effective. They've taken some key personnel, like King Yuri Gnopovich of the White Rus, and I would be very, very interested in actually exploring this a bit as well. And that is what we're going to be doing in this episode. But for starters, let's talk about the Eromata Imperio Santua. We are, of course, still very much speaking Basque. Basque has no longer the status of a niche language. We talk Basque, and many of our vassals here, of course, both in Aquitaine and Italy, speak it. I assume that as time passes, as things move on, that the French will also learn Basque so that they can participate in our court. It's not just that, but the entire northern kingdoms of Iberia are also speaking Basque, and I gotta tell you, I absolutely love that for us. This is just, it's a very, very different world. We are in a position where we aren't forcing it on anybody, it's just that it naturally spreads because we have a very admirable king, well, at this point, emperor. And this actually brings me to the next point. At every given moment going forward, what we should remember, and I think this is one of the most unique things about Emperor Philippe in general, Emperor Philippe the Great is not named the Great because he showed his prowess, because he destroyed his enemies and he made sure that, if somebody opposed him, they would learn what it means to suffer. No. He is a man that simply ruled through consent, that made sure that he respected the customs of the Italians, the French, the Occitans, the Arpatans, the Bretons, and so on, and that he made it clear that as long as they respected him, he would respect them. We have, in the past, given our supporters additional rights whenever they showed loyalty. Whenever they showed loyalty that they didn't owe us, we made sure to say, you know what, you are a respectable person and I shall treat you as such. And this is very important to me, because when we look at the Holy Roman Empire as it is created in an 867 playthrough and normal playthroughs, they are created through massive, massive amounts of force, where, for example, you have a great character and then they conquer everything around them, they suppress it, they put in their own lords. None of that happened here. It is very unique, and it is something that I love, because this whole thing about princely elective, I mean, we all love it because it's just a unique form of succession, right? But the whole thing about princely elective is, when it comes to the basis of it, it is an idea of decentralization. It is an idea of the emperor, of the central ruler saying, I respect the local authorities, be it in Italy, be it in Aquitaine, or be it the different counts, and then of course our few dukes here in the north of France as well. And we have basically achieved the very unique situation where the further decentralization of the realm by granting certain people the right to vote, where that is really in line with roleplay. It's not at all against it. Usually, if you decentralize your power for no reason after being a warlord, then you gotta ask yourself, does that make any sense? But in this case, Emperor Philippe the Great really is believably doing this. He said, all of the people that elect me must be amongst my vassals so that they learn that the crown is bound to them as they are bound to me. It is a very unique and yet a very cool situation. I certainly welcome it. And this brings me to the next topic, which is just something, basically something I think headcanon-wise that we should keep in mind. the color of our country on the map. I am not settled on this. You may notice that if you look at the Aquitainian color, you may notice that this is a bit of a bluer purple. I tried to basically mix a bit of France in there, in the identity of this empire. But I have to tell you, I'm not actually certain. I thought about a red color for the Roman Empire, of course, but England, it just clashes. It just looks very awkward. I was stuck there between awkward and odd. Then I also thought, of course, about the white and gray of the Holy Roman Empire, and we got 3 variants of gray over here. We got a white down here with a papacy. I think it looks very odd as well. Now with the purple, it does make sense. We come from Aquitaine. We are going towards the royal purple. That is, of course, only in the right of the Roman Emperor. But it does and will, of course, eventually clash with the fact that the Byzantines, that the Eastern Roman Empire still very much exists and is around here. I am not sure what color we should choose for our map. I want something that is visually pleasing as well. Right now we're going with this slight Aquitaine modified purple. If you have a suggestion, I'm open for it. We could just go even bluer, but yeah, let's just leave it the way it is. Now, the other thing that is purely visual, but that plays a big role in my headcanon, without a doubt, is the question of our actual coat of arms. When and you may have noticed this in the last episode, when I presented the sigil of the Holy Roman Empire in the thumbnail, except it actually had the sigil of the white wolf in front of the eagle, so basically it looked like this, except it had the red sigil with the white wolf right there. I originally intended on using that, because, okay, it's the Roman eagle, and it might be interesting, the double-headed, you know, with the halos around their heads, the double-headed eagle, also quite interesting, but I looked into it and I said to myself, is the symbolism really that good there? Is that something that really works for us? Emperor Philippe the Great would not really be the kind of person, as soon as you reforge the Holy Roman Empire, the biggest, the universal ruler of the world. That is the Christian theory, by the way, behind the idea of the Roman Empire, that they are the universal ruler, the universal empire, which is why there's this dissonance between us and the East, of course. And with that in mind, I feel like putting your own stamp on it would be somebody would do that if they are arrogant, if they are ignorant of the ways of the world, if they don't understand the role that they play, and he in particular is humble. I just thought it would be bad form. I also think that the Roman eagle is not technically a bad idea, but we would kind of clash with Germany. If we just did a one-headed one, we would basically just be Germany. If we used the two-headed one, we would be using something that didn't really come around until the 14th, 15th century, so I took a look again, I checked out what we could do, and in particular here in southern France, well in Aquitaine, but modern-day southern France, many of the local rulers, for example Charles the Pious, many of the local rulers really did style themselves in the Roman way. They would utilize denarii, they would utilize, or they would create currency, for example, that was very reminiscent of the actual Roman Empire. They would make sure to always maintain that they have a connection to it, and in this world, we are in a position where Emperor Philippe the Great is the shield and sword of the papacy, not necessarily against, for example, Al-Andalus, although that of course does play a role, but against the Basileia Romaeon. And this is very, very important, because we have to remind ourselves of what that means. That means that we exist to question the right of the Eastern Roman Empire to exist. Questioning that and asserting that we are who we are, that we are above our opponents, I think that that plays a big role in the symbolism that we should be using. And with all of that in mind, I took a look at this, and I created basically a fairly common style. You can see it's there is an icon here. Let me just check this out. There's an icon here that is actually this one, right, with the alpha and the omega, but I wanted something else. So what we have here is the Cairo. The Cairo is a very old symbolism for Christianity. It was, as far as I understand it, first used by Constantine the Great, of course, the first Roman emperor that turned to Christianity, and it plays a massive, massive role even in Western Christianity. Not only does Catholicism, for example, still use it, so this is not just an Orthodox thing, although when you see it in media, you most of the time will see it in the hands of the Eastern Roman Empire. No, this is a Christian thing. Having the Cairo and having the Alpha and the Omega, these are this is the Greek letter, right? So this goes into this direction, and this is very, very important, because what we do here, by utilizing the symbolism of Constantine the Great himself, again, it spread out into various other locations. That symbol is actually very, very common throughout all of the Christian world, basically. But in this case, what we are declaring is that not just Rome, thanks to the Pope holding it, and the Pope, of course, being aligned with us, not just Rome is ours, no, Constantinople too. And with that, we are not just claiming to be the Western Roman Empire. We are claiming that we are the Roman Empire period. We claim that we are the lone emperor of the world, that we are the lone emperor of what was and what will be. And I think that that is very important to point out. It really makes it so that we show our faith, that we are born as an empire protecting the Pope, again, the symbolism here for Christianity, but it also shows that we have a claim on all of Rome. And I think that is very, very important, much more important than leaving our family's mark on this, in particular in the eyes of Emperor Philippe. I think he puts a lot of value in this. Now, underneath, I put a laurel wreath. I did that basically to emphasize that we are Rome, but this equally means Christianity, and our realm, stands underneath the guidance, but also stands underneath the command of Christianity, yet again showing that what we do in the name of God, we do in the name of the Church, we do in the name of the Pope. Emperor Philippe has lived this way his entire life, and I think that this is really nice symbolism. I personally really enjoy this, so I hope that you understand where I'm coming from there. And by the way, something that I always ask myself, but I could never properly trace it back because the Wikipedia entries actually don't connect it in this way. But this, right, the Asturias flag with the cross right here, this is Alpha and Omega as well. This is the same Christian symbolism except with a regional cross effectively. And then we utilize this again, of course, in our symbolism here as well. That flag is going to stay. I want us to be much more Rome adjacent in our self-understanding than the Holy Roman Empire depicts itself in 1066. I want it to be clear that Emperor Philippe the Great views himself as basically the heir, the conqueror, the recreator of Charlemagne's realm, of the Roman Empire, by virtue of being Charlemagne's successor, and with that in the position of being the universal ruler of Christianity and of the world. And he doesn't mean this in a grandstanding way, he means this in the way that the bickering, that the infighting must be ended. Basileus Simeon is nothing more than the king of the Greeks, and he should accept that. That is the mission statement of Emperor Philippe the Great and the Eromator Imperio Santua. I really wanted to put that into perspective because it is very, very different from, I think, the classic Holy Roman Empire that creates itself and then just exists as this funny decentralized body. We are an administrative body that accepts and endorses decentralization, but ultimately says everybody answers to the Pope and with that to the Emperor. Right, so all of that aside, there were some minor changes that I made. You can see this right here. I moved the capital of Languedoc to Carcassonne. I moved the capital of the Kingdom of Aquitaine to Carcassonne, and I moved the de jure capital of our empire to Carcassonne as well. Why did I do that? I did this so that when the emperor takes over, we will be looking at the emperor wanting to rule from Carcassonne. The AI is basically determined to rule wherever, you know, the de jure territory is. They are also prone to revoke the title that is their title, because if they don't hold it, then they always want it, so I just fixed that. With that in mind, I have to tell you that I will not be moving my capital to Carcassonne. I did some testing, depending on who would win the election, on who we will get elected, basically. And the way I see it is that in basically almost all constellations, if my capital is Carcassonne, the title will not go to the emperor, which is a problem. The title would go to Prince Alva Philippe because he is our firstborn. Our firstborn will always get our capital no matter what, and he would get Carcassonne, which, if he were to not be the emperor, would be very, very weird. Now, as I already said, I want the emperor to have Carcassonne. It sounds a lot like he will not be the emperor, and the answer is that, yeah, he will not be the emperor. Let's move on to talk about the question of who are the electors and who do they want to vote for. So, as you can see, of course, we can vote for a bunch of people as close family members, claimants, and electors. Then we have the prince electors as the voters. You can see their number right there as well. I want to clarify, and I think this is a good thing, Basconiaco itself will not be a voter, because as the understanding is right now, Emperor Philippe the Great sees the lands of his immediate family, the lands of his firstborn, basically as crown lands. He views this as something that if somebody else gains power in these lands that isn't the future emperor, they should support the emperor whenever they can. They should not move against them, and to basically stop this sort of jealousy from emerging, Basconiaco will not be an elector. There's no point in Basconiaco being the elector either, so let's not do that. Let's take a look at the actual electors. We have Prince Archbishop Aldebert of Aquitania, and I love this. This is really great. Ultimately, initially, I thought maybe we will see two people in you know, the religious areas. So, for example, the Prince Archbishop of Tolosa, I knew at least one would be chosen. I wasn't sure about two. I actually like that we only have one, because Aquitania is the prime location when it comes to the influence of the church in Aquitaine. It has been in the possession of the church for quite some time, and it was in the possession, you know, as you can see right here, starting in 928, it was in the possession by some very, very influential people. How could anybody forget Bustric? Bustric has led the realm for such a long time from the shadows, from behind, doing good work for, of course, King Lope. I think that they are well deserving of this position, and I want to put even further emphasis on this. When we talk about the Holy Roman Emperor, we talk about the man that was crowned in Rome by the Pope. When we talk about the man that is eligible to be crowned Holy Roman Emperor, we talk about the man that got elected. Now, legally speaking, technically speaking, these are not the elections to the Eremata Imperio Santua. These are the elections to the kingdoms of France, Burgundy, and Aquitaine. Or, well, you know, first and foremost, of course, Aquitaine. I think Burgundy can be generally discounted. It's just that basically nobody in Burgundy itself has ever founded Burgundy since what, 855? Wait, 863 technically. I think Burgundy is basically a non-kingdom. It lost Savoy, it lost Provence. It doesn't really play any role in the schemes of the world anymore. But all that aside, the people that elect the emperor are actually electing the king of Aquitaine, France, Brittany, and then Burgundy if you want. Brittany even, I would also maybe discount. I don't think, yeah, this king has been gone for quite some time, so I would say it's largely just Aquitaine and France that really matters here. Anyway, my point being, that king, before he can go to be emperor in Rome, has to be crowned somewhere. Oftentimes, you know, when you look at the HRE, there was in Aachen, they would do a lot of traveling. It changed over the centuries. There were a lot of different traditions involved there. They would visit different places and then be crowned, and then later on, of course, be crowned emperor by the Pope. The way I want to facilitate this, the way I want to tell this story, is that the bishopric of Saint-Jean, which is, of course, in the hands of Prince Archbishop Aldebert, that this bishopric is effectively where we are when we get crowned as kings. Saint-Jean, if you don't know about him, I have to admit that I don't know all the details either, but Saint-Jean is a man that wanted to become an apprentice for another saint, and that different saint, you know, during a blizzard said, I'm not opening the door that you knock at. You say your name is Jean, but I think you're a demon. And so Saint-Jean had to sleep outside of the door. And instead of the blizzard killing him, instead of him being just completely covered in a mountain of snow, the snow basically avoided him in a circle, and this is the miracle that is attested to when it comes to Saint-Jean, who then later on was buried right here. This location, historically speaking, and in the modern day speaking as well, it is an UNESCO site, but this location is effectively also where, when you come from Paris, one of the roads that go to Santiago is going along. You will go to this location, you will pray to the grave of Saint-Jean, and it is a very important location. In this timeline, this is the most important location for the faith in Aquitaine. We will build this up. We will remember this if we play in this region for much, much longer. We will remember this, that as soon as we, for example, get manualism, we want to build up this temple. This is very, very important. I might even, I haven't done it yet, but we might even add like a special building here as well. I haven't done that yet, but yeah. So basically, we have a very, very important elector right here. Prince Archbishop Aldebert of Aquitania. He is the representative of where we are crowned. He is the man that crowns us as well, and all of the people that are the archbishops of Aquitania. And then we shall go to Rome. That is the story behind why he became a prince-elector and Toulouse did not. He is the voice of the church in the empire. Now, the other electors, also quite interesting actually. We have the Duchess Veronica of Auvergne. Auvergne, I think, despite our differences when it comes to how she utilized her power in recent years, I think Auvergne is an example of bravery, of chivalry, and of the will to stand up for the faith. Because she has, if you recall, she has revolted together with our mother, with Duchess Elizabeth. She revolted together with her against the cannibal when no one else would. She did this, and I think it has to be pointed out that Duchess Veronica is absolutely respectable. She earned a place in the books of history, and with that, of course, the role of a Prince Elector. I think she is basically in our ear. Then you have Prince Martin of Provence. He is a family member, it has to be said, he is a family member, but Provence also, yet again, revolted against King Asna. Now, long term, this may actually be moved together, because Philippe Veronique will be inheriting both of them as things stand. How that exactly goes, I mean, that is day-to-day politics for the future. I am not too worried about that right now, but of course they deserve to be electors. And with that, we actually have everybody that gets to vote in Aquitaine. We have 3 Aquitainian voters, Auvergne, Provence, and of course Aquitania. Then we have 2 that are in Burgundy, and I think 2 that also deserve it. 2 that are just very interesting characters. We have Duke Casimir of Wieden. Duke Casimir of Wieden, just an outstanding personality. I think the entire Dukes of Wieden, very, very interesting, very, very fascinating. And he was at the forefront of fighting in the name of the Emperor as well. So this is a person of power, a person that doubtlessly deserves it also. Then we have Duke Friedrich of Transylvania, and all of a sudden, isn't it funny that he was willing to join the Empire? Isn't it funny that he recognized from where the wind was blowing? And the result is that he is one of the most important men in the realm. I would argue that Duke Friedrich of Transylvania is the most efficient and effective diplomat of the realm. He is a man, or well, maybe actually the role of spy master is more appropriate here. He is a man that fully understands how to succeed, how to gain more power, and he is not afraid of using it. And I mean, that brings him exactly into this position. So we have 3 voters inside of Aquitaine, 2 inside of Burgundy, and then we have 2 voters in France. We have Ida of Valois, and that is just absolutely amazing. I really, really love her being here, because you can trace her, of course, to Queen Giselle of France, who was an outstanding queen, who we knew, who cooperated very tightly with us when we just were the Duke of Aquitaine, who we could have actually, and this is such a twist in history if you really think about it, she was threatened by the then King of France. Let me grab his title. Let me grab the history. Yeah, I will recognize him. I can tell you this. There he is. It is Aubry I. He asked us to imprison her. He asked us to capture her and then hand her over, and we didn't do it. And now we have one of the most loyal, but also one of the most strongest servants in France, which is her family. Duchess Ida, it's not the same dynasty, this is Hainaut, but either way, Duchess Ida of Valois, as you can see, is one of the most extensive landowners in this entire realm, and with that, of course, justified, I think, to be a Duke Elector. Then right here, we have Duke Aribo II of Bar, and he is a bit of a... He comes out of nowhere, basically. He doesn't hold all that much land, but he does hold land that is fairly close to Aachen. And Aachen is, of course, the old imperial capital. Now, we have nothing to do with Aachen. I do want to make that clear as well. That is where Charlemagne's palace is right here. You can see that, but we aren't governing from there. We've never been active in Lorraine. Our old king used to be allied to them, but that's neither here nor there. I think that Duke Aribo II was effectively chosen to play this role as the emissary of all those that are adjacent to our realm and of all those that once were a member of the Carolingian Empire. Duke Aribo II is, as far as I'm concerned, probably the most out there and hostile elector that we possibly could have at this moment. Just because, ultimately, he is much more at home in Lotharingia than he is in this empire. Where that goes, I can't tell you right now, but I'm very excited to see that. The other candidates that I had in mind were, for example, Anjou, Normandy, but Normandy is effectively falling apart. Anjou is not exactly strong either. Transylvania here, Bourgogne, Transylvania, I should say, just far too weak. And then there are, of course, no dukes here. So basically, the 2 very powerful dukes that hold a huge part of the land that is ruled over here have become the electors. The only person I think that maybe unfairly was walked over is Count Simon, but it doesn't make any sense for him to become an elector. A, he's not a duke, of course, right now, but B, I don't think that he has our ear at all. So, the way I see this is, we have 3 electors in Aquitaine, one of which is theocratic, so 2 secular electors, 2 secular electors in Burgundy, which also coincidentally are like the entirety of Burgundy, if you really think about it, but yeah. And then we also have 2 electors in France. I think this is very, very fair, because again, the electors elect the king of Aquitaine in France, rather than the emperor. The emperor then, so also with that the king of Italy, is declared by the Pope. This is a very important differentiation, which historically, of course, was also true. But that is why the Italians do not get to vote. The Italians are basically handed to us by virtue of the Pope agreeing. And this actually brings us to the end of the insight here. I think the only thing that we really need to point out is that Duchess Ida is a troublesome person, but she's a very loyal person. And even if they aren't vibing all that much together, King Philippe, he's not in love with her, right? But he respects her very much as a ruler. She's not a sinner or anything in that way, so he definitely respects her word. Then, again, the Duke of Bar, I think we're very lukewarm towards him. We are fairly lukewarm, I think, to basically everybody in France, except, of course, Count Simon. But yeah, the politics of France are vastly different than the politics that we are used to in Aquitaine. In Aquitaine, we rule through our very strong and very loyal dukes. They all have their realms, and we respect them. Whereas in France, it's a very decentralized, a very small-minded and small state-ish sort of a situation. These counts, these dukes, they're barely worth the term duke. We have to see whether this means stability or whether it means instability. I will not change the power situation here anytime soon. I could theoretically be giving out a bunch of duchies. I could make sure that, it's all under the guidance of a couple of very strong dukes. I will not be doing that, obviously. I'm looking at a situation where I want to see how it develops naturally. I want to see what occurs in the natural state of France. We are a very hands-off ruler, and that shall continue. Right, so what we are going to do now, we're going to set ourselves up for the next proper episode, and then we're going to take a look at the Slavic world. So, for the vote, I tried all of them, and as you can see, if we were to run, for example, Prince Alva, here you go, you could see that a good amount of people has a negative opinion, the majority, in fact. I think a very important part that Prince Philippe here, or Emperor Philippe, will not ignore is the negative opinion that, of course, the Duke, the Archbishop, I should say, has. Prince Alva always has been a difficult sight for us. We love our son, but we know of his secret, and they're already not too positive on him. They all think that he is not really somebody that should be the Roman Emperor, and we know he's a witch, which, hey, we're not acting against him, but we are worried about this, so we're not going to put him up for vote here. Count Bermudo, we could put up for a vote here, without a doubt. Now, Count Bermudo, as you can see, has a very positive response. He's a generally well-liked person, but Count Bermudo is a man that we, don't fully trust, because we know that he has taken lovers. We know that he is unfaithful, even though he may have bought his freedom when it comes to his the trait there, right? But I don't think we see him as an adequate heir on a moral level, but also he's simply not our child. Now, Prince Martin, we could vote for. You can see not nearly as positive. He is willing to vote for him, but yeah, as a known witch, we're not going to be doing that. We had the entire arc declaring that we have to forego witchcraft if we want to work with the Pope the way that we have worked. I'm not putting Prince Martin in this position. I don't think that is this adequate at all. Now, Princess Elvira, as I said, we are going to go towards equal when it comes to our own succession law, but yeah, we can put her up, technically speaking, but she has a minus 150 penalty, and that won't really see much purpose. But the person and our son that ultimately will be put up is, you may have guessed this, Prince Nuno Boscarancia. Prince Nuno, outside of Duke Casimir, Ida, and Aribo, so France is basically rejecting our candidate, at least right now. He is just a child, but, it's not by much that they're rejecting him. We're going to put him up, because here's the backing of the church, here's the backing of Core Aquitaine, and he has the backing of yet another Burgundy ruler right there. We're going to put him up, we're going to see how he develops. Right now he's a brave, forgiving, and arbitrary man. Outside of his arbitrariness, I believe that he is a good man, and that he will develop to be indeed worthwhile of being the emperor. So he is who we're going to be voting for. I think he is the cleanest when it comes to our sons and their secrets. We brought him up, and we aren't part of the witch circle, so he is not a witch, I can tell you that, unless somebody manually tried to convert him, which they may have, but even then, we are not aware of this, so Emperor Philippe would not act on that information if it were to be true. We're going to elect him, or we're going to at least vote for him. We're going to hope that that works out. I will also actually, King Garcia Sabeye, I will offer him an alliance for the sole purpose that he holds Santiago. The way we work right now, obviously Saint-Geniat is insanely important for us. However, it's not a direct holy site. The way we work right now is that we are going to protect Santiago. And a part of that is that we, of course, protect King Garcia, who, by the way, is our nephew. The old king died, drank himself to death just 3 years ago. And we're going to protect him as good as we can. Let's take a look at this. Here's a nice little courtroom right here. Lyonesse, Art of Strategy, excellent tapestry. Good for you, my son. My nephew. Who did he marry? Queen Urraca vs. of... the sister of the King of Leongo. This is another topic. I will not move against Leongo. Actually, what I will be doing is... I will attempt to convince the de jure territory. I will attempt to convince the de jure territory here bit by bit. We're just going to reclaim it. I don't see it at all that we would be declaring a war for this. It's just not very in character, I think. So bit by bit, we're going to work away on this. Speaking of that, actually, I'm not concerned about the papacy here at all, because this is basically rule as one. Our empire runs from Brittany all the way to Rome. Right, so this is not in our way. Maybe a future generation of kings and emperors will say the Pope shouldn't hold these lands, but right now that is not a topic. What is a topic for me is that we shall get a claim on Ravenna, hopefully the whole duchy. You can see it is technically possible. I will kick out Prince Bishop Pancratius, otherwise known as the Exarch of Italy. The Vasiliero Mayon needs to be taught a lesson, and we will be the ones to do it. And I think that may be our last action here. These victories are long gone. Low county control. We can vassalize Duke Suleiman, who is the leader here in Valencia. We are, of course, going to vassalize him. More protection in Iberia is good for everybody involved. The trade in the Western Mediterranean truly is now being kept safe. Other than that, we may change our council, but if we're going to do that, we're going to be doing that in the upcoming episode. I don't think there's much that we are going to be doing there. Do I have nobody here that would be interesting? No, I don't think that is very vital. We got some prisoners. We can take care of that in the next episode. Yeah, for the moment, look at that. We're simply going to let them vote for one another. I like that Duke Friedrich, by the way, is being elected by Duke Aribo, but Duke Friedrich says, no, of course not. I will stick together with the Pope here. I think that is a very strong move. We're showing Duke Aribo that our authority is even true in the core lands of Charlemagne. Now, we could do the court event, but we're going to do it in the next episode. I think this brings us to the end of the internal investigation. We set ourselves up for the next episode. In the next episode, we will probably do some internal things and then look towards the Vasiliero Mayon, because they need to be kicked out. There can't even a debate. If we take Ravenna, even if we don't take the duchy, then Casentino will eventually become independent, and we can hand over both to the Pope. I want the Pope at least to hold Romagna, so Rumunsko here. Right, now let's take a look at the Slavic side of the map. Something very interesting happened in Poland, and it is threefold, if you will. We have Queen Zbislava of Polsko. She is Slovene. She stems from the Nitrava dynasty. The Nitrava dynasty, yep, there you go. I think this shows everything you need to know. Of course, Casimir also is Nitrava, but if I'm not mistaken, they have their own house indeed, Modre. They are the Queen of Chorvatsko, they are the Queen of Velka Morava, and the Queen of Polsko. I love, A, that he only had daughters, and B, that they're now all women. Catholicism is undergoing a very, very interesting time. And I am all for this. Listen, what you have to realize, and I get comments every now and again, I just want to rebuke them. The idea that don't do matrilineal marriages and such. Listen, if you want to play entirely historical, yes, certainly, I can see this. But I will tell you this outright. The way we have to play around our house, because if we are no longer in our house, then that just means that we are no longer actually present as far as the gameplay is concerned, is not realistic. I don't care for this. In this world, equality plays a much, much bigger role than it did historically speaking, and that is in part because Emperor Philippe the Great and his house and his family have achieved this. We have seen so many strong female rulers, and we are very, very soon going to adopt the general succession law of equality. Listen, I think you gotta stop worrying about that too much. This is alt history, and in that alt history, women play a much more magnificent role than they were allowed to play historically speaking, because of what happened in the tiny duchy of Basconiaco. Things simply are different. And so, I love the fact that this now exists right here, this triple alliance of the queen rulers of the Nitrava dynasty, but more importantly actually, Zbislava doesn't hold too much power. If we break down her kingdom, you may see that Duke Rabrosh of Horny Zleshko actually rules most of her kingdom. He is an incredibly powerful lord, vastly superior in numbers. He is Catholic, he's Slovene, but he stems from the Bratislavish dynasty. And the Bratislavish dynasty actually has a very long history, as you can see, being Slovene, but a longer history being Polish. They are the original tribes of Poland in this area. It's fascinating to me. They are basically the Silesian tribe, and it's very fascinating to me because you're looking at a situation where they were subdued, they changed their cultures, but the old dynasty kept itself afloat. Not just that, in the west now, we have the Silesian dynasty, which I believe actually, does that mean you're also just from Silesia? Yeah, look at that. They are Silesia. So we have Upper and Lower Silesia. Both of these tribes are now vital in the politics of Poland. I wonder whether High Chieftain Natbo will join Polsko. It depends on what kind of court she has, whether she is accepted enough. She has a diplomatic court, which is great to get others to join you, but it's very low, of course, in terms of amenities. They might be unified here. We might see a renaissance of the Polish power in this area, but that is difficult. Now, directly to the north, we have the family Rudolf, and let me just check this. You seem like a younger family. When did you die? 955. Yeah, they are a very young family. Actually, here's the oldest one, the original one. He founded this house, and he still comes after the game start, but they have now consolidated Mazuri. They are also Polish, ruling largely over Russian folks, and of course also Vidalists, except now they have been converted, but they turn to the Orthodox Church. Now let me explain this. With the way the game drops the faith here, Poland is generally more likely, if they have the culture Polish, to adopt Catholicism, but it's not guaranteed. It could be, very rarely, a Shari. It could also be Orthodox. In this case, the merchants, the actual priests of the Orthodox Church reached High Chieftain Eustachi first, or they made the more compelling arguments, pardon me there. Either way, High Chieftain Eustachi turned to Orthodoxy. So we have a bit of a conversation here, I guess, that has to be had within Poland between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. In the meantime, the Sorbian tribes, they were a risk, but they have also since turned to Catholicism. You can see that most of their, people that actually live in these areas have not yet bought into the faith, but whether they can resist or not is a different question. We shall see how that goes. I just like seeing the native rulers here, making it so that they don't just, sit there and get nowhere. Let me actually take a look at this. Yeah, look at that. They already unlocked it. The Sorbians also in the early medieval period. The Polish, not yet, but not making any progress either. The head of the culture here, High Chieftain Natbo, right, he is still tribal. He would have to convert his government, but he can now do this. So that is very positive. Now, in the Rus area, let's take a look at this. Kiev still indeed Khuzaite and very powerful. 7,600 troops. You can see we have 219 into the face of hostility, so it's fairly close. This largely happens here because convert an involved ruler or county. They're basically converting left and right, and then conciliation is largely occurring because convert to the local involved culture or faith. So basically, people that weren't of the involved faith, they either, so if they turn to the local faith, then that counts for conciliation because they accept the people the way they are. But if they turn to the faith of Orthodoxy, of, for example, Catholicism, then indeed it counts for hostility, because those are the intruders. And I like this. This is exactly the way it's supposed to go. Now, there is one big one. This was sheer luck for Orthodoxy, but also I think they're gonna fall apart. We'll have to see. King Hjalmar Trusteel of Österland has turned to Orthodoxy. The feared Finnish Empire that here once persisted together with the Eesti is all of a sudden Orthodox. Now, he is in many wars. He has 11,000 troops. We shall see whether he can win that. But he is in many wars, and you can see he is actually being actively challenged. And, I mean, here he's just a supporter. But, yeah, I'm not sure whether he will actually be winning each one of these wars. If he persists, we may have an Orthodox Eastern Scandinavia, a Southern Asatru Scandinavia, and a Western Catholic Scandinavia. I really like that as well. So, now let's take a look at the details of this. Kiev, very stable, and Khuzaite. They, I believe, yep, they have started converting in the struggle area. Let's hope that that indeed continues for them. We have an Orthodox White Ruthenian. I have to assume that King Yuri Gnupovich was promised, and wait a minute, if I'm not mistaken here, these are the descendants of the blind Queen Odny. I remember her. She was around in 999. A legendary Varangian queen that maintained a kingdom, a legendary kingdom here in the east, and her descendants still live here, but As you can see, the old guards have now been shed. The conversion is still very much occurring. It was King Hertha Knut II Guthormovich of the White Rus that first converted. And there's a lot to be done still when it comes to the conversion. We got an internal rebellion here. It's a subjugation war as well. Jesus, Cernigov may just subjugate them. Actually, no, thanks to Österland. Oh, it is such a big question whether the Orthodox can stand together or whether the Khuzaite will take them over. This conflict, I love it. This would never happen in a normal game. But instead, we see the Khuzarites potentially ousting the Orthodox. And that is a big question. If you oust the Orthodox, the threat for the Khuzarite as a geopolitical force here is largely taken. We may yet see a Khuzarite Ruthenia here. But if they fail, then the Orthodox are present with Österland and the White Rus in this area. I think Ogus Il here, they have changed very little. Yeah, you can see that they didn't really convert. I think we got some more. Ah, okay, this makes perfect sense. The Rurikid dynasty, of course, turned to Orthodoxy. Same for the Sigurdre here. But we have a bunch of people still that, as you can see here, are basically pagans. And with that, of course, do not really take any interest. Here you can see it as well. They internally have a bunch of enemies that are still pagans of either form. And they don't really have an interest in the words of the church. Yeah, Österland, their king may be Orthodox, but their population very much is not. I think, oh, that is so, that is really attractive to me. They basically converted everything around the Gulf of, what is that here? The Gulf of Bothnia. They converted that sort of stuff, right? So these people here are converted. They are involved, I assume, in trade as well. And the more remote areas are all still pagan. This is a volatile area. Let me tell you, this is an incredibly, incredibly volatile area. Let's take a look at maybe some other things. I don't think we have seen a splinter culture just yet. Doesn't appear that way. No code languages yet, because of course they're all still tribal, but that may change within like the last 10 years. You see the first feudalization around these river deltas has already occurred. And I think that is about it for the moment. Very, very volatile situation. Poland seems to have turned largely to Catholicism, and in 1057 they can, a bit late, but they can finally join the geopolitical stage of Catholicism, of course. And then here we have a very, very aggressive activity between, of course, the Orthodox and the Khuzarite, and a very aggressive situation between the pagans and the Orthodox as well. Catholicism didn't really make it into this area, which is fair enough because they took so much of Poland already. Very, very fascinating. I really love where that is going, and I wonder whether we can soon get some real diplomatic relationships with any of them. That's gonna be very exciting. Now, the Seljuk Empire still exists. I'm going to now apply a fix to him so that he stops going into infinite prestige hell. The motto behind this, Uber Epic Zack, that is how I pronounce it, who is behind the expanded mod series. At least he's one of the people behind it. He has told me how to fix the prestige, and maybe we'll see a resurgent empire here. They're allied to the Ghaznavids now, which changes things. But they are still very powerful. Yes, sure. Sultan Al-Muazzam Chagri, death dealer of the Seljuk Empire, is gone. He was actually assassinated under mysterious circumstances. I hear, actually, that the Zoroastrians did this. But Sultan Al-Muazzam Alp Arslan is still here, and he may yet achieve something. These are tumultuous times, but at least Western Christianity is in good hands. We're going to be looking towards subduing the Basileia Romaion to the east. In the name of the Eremata Imperius Santur, we're going to work together with our electors, with all the other vassals of ours, and we're going to, of course, work ever more closely with the people to our east. If they could become our enemies, our friends, our allies, I mean, it could change the path that we take in history. Anyway, this was it for today. In the next episode, we will kick it off in a new chapter as Emperor Philippe the Great of the Eremata Imperio Santua. I will see you then. Later, alligator.